here on Monday doing our standard daily live stream on workplace relations and how that relates to COVID-19. So here we are at the beginning of a new week. I'm going to put a sportsman's bet on this being the week during which JobKeeper questions subside and we start to talk more and more about the planning and opportunity phase of coming out of the COVID-19 crisis. That's not me predicting for sure that we are coming out of it. Certainly there's a bit of a narrative building about that. In New Zealand last week, we saw them move to what they're calling stage 3 lockdown, which is somewhat similar to what we're already in here in Australia. I think what we're going to see is an increasing relaxation from the Morrison government here in Australia. They've got a deadline date of the 12th of May. I say all of that with caution though, and the caution is this, is that that doesn't change the fact that the mantra that I'll be relying upon is that we prepare for the worst but plan for the best. So whilst I think there might be a relaxation coming up, I'm also presuming a couple of things. One, that the full extent of the pain that we're all going to suffer out of this hasn't yet been felt. And second of all, that there could be a second wave of problems. And by second wave of problems, I'm not really, I'm no epidemiologist, so I'm not predicting second waves of illness and so on. I'm just trying to think for my business, what could that mean? Second shutdown, more increased shutdown, what are the possible things that could be going on for us? And I'm still planning on that basis and would urge you to do so, particularly as we move out of the somewhat chaotic process that we've all been through in doing our JobKeeper applications, and have hopefully got those now on track as we move into this next phase of the COVID-19 crisis. So on that note, I'm just going to start with a couple of interesting side stories and not really pivots today, but you'll see why. Bear with me, I'm having to lift this up. This was a very kind gift from our client, the Australian Sweetco, who's been watching this. I am fully available for sugar-covered treats, and I don't think we have to put that on any bribery register or anything like that. I'll check with my finance team, but I'm very grateful for that, particularly these chocolate-covered peanut brittles, which will be making their way home with me this evening. So thank you very much for that, a very thoughtful gift in response to some of the help that you say you've been getting through this. So I'm actually, as I've said before, enjoying doing these sessions. They're giving me sort of an even keel through the days. It's a nice regular thing now in my diary that at midday we have this process, this conversation really, looking at workplace relations issues, and it's helped me actually during the planning process within the business here. The second client-related communication that I'm just going to refer to was, I got a really good question over the weekend about labour hire companies and a business that's not a client of ours, actually just asking a couple of questions about how to treat people that have been out on labour hire contracts, but in the context of the COVID-19 crisis, the host company has said they no longer need the services of the person. That person's employed by the labour hire company. What do they do with that person during the crisis? And my response to that was that in that labour hire arrangement, where a labour hire business employs the person that they send out to host sites, essentially what they have is someone who no longer has any work to do, and they can take the choice there. They can either then go through a redundancy process, or they might rely on JobKeeper to have that person paid the $1,500 a fortnight on effective stand down and do a JobKeeper enabled direction to that effect. The third choice would be actually asking and giving a direction to the person to come and do alternative duties in the meantime, at a potentially an alternative location as well. So for my view, and the reason I tell that story now, is that labour hire company is not really that different to the rest of us in that situation. It just happens that their person was out on a project effectively, and that project's come to an end, and you should still be making those decisions with your business hat on. Do you need to retain that person's services? If so, you'll be looking at the JobKeeper avenues. If you don't, you should probably be looking at questions of redundancy through that process. So that was the second contact that I just wanted to refer to. And the third one was a company that I've mentioned on here before, a company called Zuki, which is a fascinating business that does the coffee shops within hospitals around the country. And they're really playing an interesting role during this COVID-19 crisis and quite literally keeping our health services fueled with caffeine, which seems about as critical a service as there is out there right now. But just chatting to them over the course of the weekend and hearing about the challenges that they're having, and what I think we're seeing from around, and this isn't particular to these guys, I'm seeing it a lot, is that there's this sort of quite negative narrative in the public about the idea that there are businesses out there rorting JobKeeper. And when I did a TV thing last week, I was asked that question and I said, look, honestly speaking, I just don't see it. I don't see, through the thousands of businesses that we speak to here, through the thousands of businesses we're speaking to out there and our clients, we're not getting people saying, how do I rort JobKeeper? What you're getting quite typically is people that are probably being overly generous with the utility of JobKeeper to pass on social security to their employees. Or as my contact Zuki said, that in essence the business is being asked to be a clearinghouse for the government between their subsidy and handing it over to their employees. And I've actually been saying to a lot of employers, I think, guys, you need to start thinking about your primary hat again, which is your hat as a business owner and how you manage the business properly. Don't just get into the habit of paying over JobKeeper subsidies just because the government's asking you to be that clearinghouse, which is this phrase that Sandy used that I find very useful. But we're also on the other side of it starting to see more and more examples of employees trying to get in the way of the system, let's say. That's trying to put that as neutrally as I can, where they're refusing to come back to work on the basis that they've got some personal commitment or other, or they just don't want to come back to work, or they say it's not clean and safe to do so and they're worried about it, even if the workplace is doing all that's reasonably practicable to follow government guidance and so forth. In essence, what happens with that is you've got employees, quite often they're casual employees as well, who there is this grey test around whether they're regular and systematic and you were going to put them on JobKeeper in the first place. And the litmus test that I've given you guys for that is that someone's regular and systematic if there's a mutual expectation that you will provide them with a certain amount of work each week and they will do it. And I use the litmus test to say that if you didn't provide that work or they refused to do it, would the one party ring the other party and say, what's going on? You normally do Tuesdays for me, why are you saying no? And what we're seeing increasingly is these people that employers have said, no, they're regular and systematic, they've been with me over 12 months. But now when I'm asking them to come in, they're saying no. And my response to that has been, first and foremost, that person isn't regular and systematic if they're saying no to shifts that they would otherwise have done. And if they're turning around and saying, I've called Fair Work, they've told me I'm a casual, they told me I don't have to do these shifts. That might well be true if they are a true casual, but if they're regular and systematic and you're out there trying to get them a subsidy from the government, then they should be turning up to those shifts. You can't ask them to do more than they would normally do on a regular and systematic basis. But if they're not even willing to what they used to do, my recommendation is that they are not regular and systematic, and you shouldn't be bothering to include them in JobKeeper. There is an alternative pathway, which is to run essentially a disciplinary process for people who are refusing to reasonably carry out management instructions. But that's what you normally do with permanent employees. If you've got these regular and systematic casuals who are showing themselves not to be willing to do hours for you, then you might look at excluding them from fortnights going forward. So that's a little bit on that aspect. And I think that I'd be really interested to hear, not because I want to whip up some kind of negative frenzy, but if other people are suffering problems with employees saying no to work or otherwise trying to get them to act in a way that looks probably outside the spirit or boundaries of JobKeeper, can you let us know? It would be great to hear that. Not least so we can help you through it, but also just be interested to understand this, because it again feels to me such a negative way of looking at business owners, people that are managing businesses, to constantly assume that they're out there trying to rort people, which seems just bloody unfair, frankly. And I thought of this on Friday morning, actually, when I was driving on Friday morning early on. This was about 5 in the morning. I was driving to meet a mate, a fellow business owner who I catch up with once a week, and we have a good chin wag about business. And on the way there, I saw quite a familiar sight to a lot of you, which is I saw a cafe owner opening up in the dark, opening up their cafe. And I thought to myself, jeepers, that's grit, that's determination. It's easy enough for me to be turning up to work each day and managing what I'm doing. I've got a very busy workforce at the moment with people ringing us up and asking questions. I've also got a big workforce that I feel very responsible for, and I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing by them all the time. But for the cafe owner who has been had a lot of their business challenged and ripped away from them by things well outside their control, just to see them with grit and determination get up and open up every 5 a.m. every day, just for some moment it just really struck a chord with me. For some reason it really struck a chord with me, and I just looked at it and I thought, that is grit. That's the kind of grit that small business owners show day to day. They're the guys out there really doing this for the economy at the moment against massive adversity. And it really peeves me, to be honest, to start seeing more and more business beat up about the idea that businesses are out there rorting employees and things, when that's just not the small business world that I know and understand. So if you're getting the converse, I'd love to hear from you. Like I say, principally because I'd love to help, but it'd be just really interesting to see what people are struggling against with JobKeeper at the moment. So there are a few things to kick off with. The other thing to note before we launch into Q&A is that on JobKeeper, the rules have been updated. It looks like they were updated officially on the 1st of May, but they've just been updated on the website over the weekend, which with particular reference to this 16 and 17-year-old thing. So what they've done is defined people as being dependent or in full-time education in accordance with the rules under the Social Security Act. What you will see is guidance within now the employee nomination form, which gives some bullet point guidance as to whether someone is dependent or in full-time education, which should help your employees in filling that out to say, am I or am I not an eligible employee going forward? And if they're not, what you're going to be entitled to is the first 3 JobKeeper fortnights. So basically, if you've already applied for them, you've already probably paid the first 2 now, and you might be about to pay the 3rd one. They're saying, look, pay the first 3, and then going forward, that person won't be an eligible employee. So there's a bit of clarification around there, and have a look just on the nomination form is the best place to see exactly what that says. And I kindly got the heads up on that from someone that's watching this, a chap called Jeremy from Model Rock Lashes. And I just wanted to say thanks, Jeremy, for working collaboratively with me on that. It's really quite nice to see on this that there's a sense of community building up with people that are very close to this and are helping each other out as much as I'm trying to do the same. So thank you very much for that, Jeremy. So on that note, let's move on to some Q&A. I'm going to say one positive thing though before we do. For those of you that have been avid watchers, you might remember we looked at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and looked at the types of businesses that are really thriving in post-COVID circumstances, which are typically those one at the very bottom or bottom 2 levels of that hierarchy. So businesses that are providing people with the very fundamentals of life, food, water, shelter, those kind of businesses and related to that. And I was thinking about it more over the weekend, and I thought the reality is most of us are in that space. The businesses that are going to suffer long term, my view is, I'm not a clairvoyant and I'm not sure about this, but it's those ones that are right up at the top of the pyramid that have probably been trying, particularly in startup land, trying to solve really quite narrow problems that are kind of luxury problems. They're what sometimes we all flippantly call first world problems. Oh, that's giving me a way of solving that issue, rather than actually operating at the bottom of the pyramid, which is where most small businesses are, frankly, where you're operating in providing people with those basic commodities in life, rather than trying to solve some sort of esoteric issue right at the top of the pyramid. So my hope is actually, thinking about it, is that those needs won't change. One of the problems we'll have, I think, at the bottom of the pyramid is that people might need less of them, and that's where we're all going to end up in, I suppose, quite fierce competition with each other. But in reality, those bottom level needs will still be there. It's the ones up at the top, those self-actualization businesses, that will probably suffer most from this. Anyway, I'll stop waffling on about that. Let's do some Q&A. Stu.
Sure. Let's kick it off with this one from Louise. She's a client, Kitchen Antics in Wagga Wagga. I've been paying JobKeeper for April. As of this Sunday, a casual staff member has resigned. I pay weekly on a Monday, so I'll pay her for the work she has done up until this Sunday, plus top up JobKeeper. Do I need to also pay her next week when she has left?
No, so as long as she got, Louise it was, thanks very much for the business there in Wagga. So as long as she's been paid the $1,500 for the third fortnight, you'll get that money back from the government. You don't need to actually pay her wages or anything else for the week ahead. So we should be midway through that third fortnight now. So you're paying in the middle of the third fortnight, and as long as you pay her the $1,500 that you're going to recover from the government, even though she's done, by the sounds of it, less hours than the $1,500, you'll get that back.
Okay. This one from Sue. We applied for JobKeeper through the ATO portal, but nowhere did it give us the option to notify that we had used the alternative test. Will this mean initially they will think we are ineligible until we notify them somehow, or they ask for further information that we use the alternative test as opposed to the basic test?
Good question. So what we've done actually internally is that with the assistance of our accountants, just writing essentially an internal memo saying this is what we've done and this is why we've done it. So there's some backing and working to the fact that otherwise on the portal all you're doing is ticking a box essentially saying I'm eligible. So I'd recommend you do that, perhaps chat to your accountant about it, doing a memo between the two of you saying, look, this is why we've said we're eligible, and this is the basis upon which we've done it.
All right. Quick one from Ivan. Do you get back paid from the time you had to suspend your business?
Ivan, I'm assuming you would have suspended your business if it was a government enforced thing at some stage in March. You will only get back pay from the 30th of March, which is when the JobKeeper scheme arises. So the first fortnight begins on the 30th of March. So you'll get $1,500 per employee, per eligible employee from that fortnight forward, but nothing for March. So it may be that you've had people that you were paying or had them on some form of leave after you got shut down, and you won't get anything for March.
Denise asks, can a boss use a chiropractor to cover reception from open until close time when they are not consistently booked in with patients? Prior to COVID-19, this role was staffed by a receptionist.
Yes, I'd see that as reasonable to ask a chiropractor who was otherwise doing work with clients. They might see that as a lesser role to the professional services they normally provide, but I'd say it's quite reasonable to ask them to do that. So there's nothing about safety there and them being asked to do something they're not otherwise skilled to do. It seems to me reasonable adaptability. It should be the case that the going rate for the receptionist, particularly under the Clerk's Award, would be less than what the chiropractor's getting as well. So assuming you're going to pay them at chiropractor rates, there shouldn't be any problem with the pay issue as well.
This one from Michael. Is there a notice period to bring stood down staff back to work?
It's a really good question, Michael. So a few people have asked this, and really the way technically a lot of people are doing it is that they say someone's on 0 hours but would normally be full-time for you. So they're currently stood down or agreed unpaid leave. what you would do, let's say you only wanted them to do half hours, 15 hours a week, 19 hours a week, something like that. You would bring them back in order to then give them a JobKeeper enabled direction to reduce them down to the 19 hours. Now, you wouldn't do that in two sequences like that. You'd do it in one process. But in order to reduce someone's hours, you need to give them the 3-day consultation period. So basically, you'd blend that together and you'd say, okay, what I'm proposing to do is take you off stand down, unpaid leave, and put you on 19 hours a week. And I'm going to do that over a 3-day consultation period. If you just wanted to bring someone back full time from stand down, then no, there's not a formal consultation or requirement to consult with them to get them back. But I'd just be practical and reasonable about that. You know, you don't want to be ringing someone and saying, I need you in an hour. I'd be saying, you know, we're on a Monday now, give them till Wednesday to get their affairs in order, so that if they are doing homeschooling and things like that, they've got the chance to do to put in alternative structures in place.
2-part question from Paul. I'll ask the first part first. I have an employee on paid leave who is not happy that his leave is being used and partially funded by JobKeeper payments. He wants to withdraw his nomination and re-nominate when his leave expires. Can he do this?
So he wants to withdraw his nomination and re-nominate when his leave expires. So as in, he just essentially he's going to stay on leave, but he doesn't think it's fair that you're allowed to use JobKeeper to pay for his leave. He thinks that that's some sort of rort. The answer is he can always withdraw his nomination and give you notice that he no longer wants to be, but I don't think he can then come back in after that. So you could choose as well not to pay him his leave if his nomination is withdrawn. So it's a bit of a muddle. What I'd suggest that you do is just have a conversation with the employee first and foremost. So you're only acting within the context of the rules. No one's trying to take anyone for a ride here. That's what the government has decided. And it just sounds like one of those things that's best sorted out by communication rather than by people withdrawing nominations and trying to put them back in later and so forth.
Second part question from Paul. Also, you previously mentioned someone who has disgruntled employees taking sick leave on JobKeeper and threatening a workers' compensation claim. Do you have an update on so-called nasty employees, or the reason why this person would think they are entitled to claim workers' compensation?
So that particular case I was working on with a client was that it was, to be honest, JobKeeper's kind of the stadium that everyone was playing in with that, but it's a totally standard set of reactions from an employee, and I sort of roll my eyes a bit cynically there, but I see it quite often with workplace relations issues that what happens is that you've got some level of dispute rather than the employee coming into a meeting, whether it's performance management, disciplinary, whatever it might be. They go off on sick leave. They consequently seek to claim workers' compensation, saying that that sickness is a stress-related illness that was caused by the employer. And it's that reason why there's these rules under workers' compensation which say that if someone's taking reasonable management action, you can't claim workers' compensation for it, which is what I suspect will happen in this specific case. The employee's gone off claiming that we shouldn't have been acting in the way that we should have done. This, when I say we, it's for our client. And I haven't had an update actually as to what workers' comp or work cover have said about that. We'll have to wait and see. But if they do end up on work cover, then essentially they'll sit out of the business claiming insurance until that expires. And we'll have to see what happens next. You know, I often say to employers during these processes that employment relations is quite tactical. To be honest, you have to spend a lot of time trying to predict and counter moves from employees in those circumstances. That can sound quite cynical, but the reality is we see this day in, day out, where people are doing things like that, and you have to, as an employer, predict those things and try and counter them in a proper and legal way.
And Ed, you've touched on this one many times before, worth revisiting, this time from Dorothy. If we were to reopen and see a spike in cash flow, which would be great, could we potentially lose our JobKeeper eligibility?
Potentially, Dorothy. There's nothing that clear about it at the moment. You'd have to carry on reporting your income and your projected income to the ATO. The ATO says they're not using those reports to remove JobKeeper from you, but I would say this: if you've been receiving JobKeeper and you do see that spike, good on you. That spike should enable you to treat that JobKeeper income, if you like, subsidy, as sort of a loan in your mind at least. So be prepared that you may be asked to do this, to pay it back at some stage. Put it this way, I think the whole point of the current situation is that no one knows what the future holds. And one of the things that the future typically holds, where there's a crisis of any type and people start fishing into their pockets to help others, is that there's normally a wash up at the end of it. And I'd just be amazed if the old mantra doesn't hold true, that there's no such thing as a free lunch. And I'd be amazed if you didn't find in due course that there was some form of repayment of things if you weren't otherwise entitled to it.
This one from Leslie. When the ATO asks for GST turnover for JobKeeper, do they mean general turnover? Because we don't charge GST for dental services.
That's a good question. So the guidance that they've given on that is that it's calculated in your BAS in the normal way, regardless of whether you charge GST or not, as dental practices don't. So have a look on the ATO website, the guidance there, or potentially chat to your accountant about that.
From Christine, if a staff member takes annual leave and they earn $800 a fortnight, do we pay annual leave loading on the $800 or the JobKeeper $1,500?
So they earn $800 a fortnight, you do it on that, not on the topped up amount.
From Susie, hi, thanks Ed and Employsure for your generosity. Do you know how to add an additional employee on the ATO business portal for JobKeeper, please? There does not appear to be an option to do so.
Yeah, I've heard that a bit actually, yeah. And what I've been saying is that when you nominate over the next day or so through single touch payroll, that you'll nominate the specific employee there. So I don't think that there'll be a problem if it doesn't match up with the number that you previously put on the business portal, but let me know if there is an issue with that.
From Erica, if a contractor was regular and systematic for over 12 months with the one company, can they get JobKeeper through that company? I know they can apply themselves as a sole trader, but wondered if the other was available.
Well, they shouldn't be going through that company because they're not an employee if they're a proper contractor, so they would only be able to do it as a sole trader or if they're an incorporated entity in that way as a director.
And we've touched on this one before too, Ed, but worth revisiting. From Gareth, we have some staff on JobKeeper that have current commitments for homeschooling and are saying they can't attend work because of this. While I understand they're in a difficult situation, what is their obligation in terms of being available to attend work while receiving JobKeeper?
So their obligation is to attend work in accordance with their contractual agreement with you. So if they're saying, no, I can't because I'm doing homeschooling, then you've got one or two options. You can either vary that contractual agreement for the time being and say, okay, we accept that, we're going to put you on some form of unpaid leave, or you can put your foot down and say, I'm sorry, you need to make alternative arrangements. I'm here getting JobKeeper for you. I also have work that I need you to do, and seek to agree those. And if they flatly refuse, that could escalate into a disciplinary issue essentially.
And Ed, this one from Ian keeps popping up time and again too. If one of our casual JobKeeper eligible workers has not worked any hours in a particular fortnight, should they still get paid the JobKeeper payment?
They should, yeah. So if they're regular and systematic casuals and you've got no work for them to do at the moment, you'd still, because of that, they've been nominated, they've agreed to the nomination, you would pay them the $1,500.
Okay. From David, based on the new age restrictions and dependent/independent rules for JobKeeper, if someone turns 18 between the 1st of March and the 11th of May, do they continue being paid JobKeeper after the 11th of May? Or as they weren't 18 before the 1st of March, do they stop receiving JobKeeper after the 11th of May?
So they're 18 on the 11th of May, by the sounds of it.
turned 18 between the 1st and the 11th of May.
Yes, I think the rules are that you're 16 or 17 on the 1st of March, which they were. So then becomes a question of dependency and full-time education. I'll double check that given the rules are new, but I think that it doesn't matter if you later become 18.
From Andrew, do SMEs need to pass on JobKeeper payments to employees, or can they hold off to ensure they are able to function and not lay off any staff?
That depends, Andrew, on what type of category of business you're getting JobKeeper as. So I've talked previously about JobKeeper where you're still operating, you're paying your staff at least $1,500. And that's where JobKeeper's at its best. That's where it's a subsidy to the employer to carry on paying its staff, keeping them working. That's really where JobKeeper works for employers. The second category is if your staff are working but they get less than $1,500 and you're topping them up. And then the third is where they're not working and you're just paying them $1,500, and that's where Sandy has used this term for me, as saying all you're being there is a clearinghouse for government subsidy or social security. So the answer is, if you're in the second or third category, you can't just hold on to the government subsidy. You've got to pay it over to your staff. If you're in the first category, you will have already paid wages and you'll be receiving the subsidy to support you going forward, essentially. Excuse me.
This one from Annette. I have a part-time employee on a contract. They also work as a sole trader and have let me know that they're going to claim it themselves. I thought that as I'm applying, they were not eligible as a sole trader so that I can claim it.
So they're part-time?
On a contract.
On a contract. So a bit of muddle of terms there, Annette, that someone's either an employee or they're a contractor. So they're working for you. If they're working as a contractor, then they can claim as a contractor for themselves as a sole trader. You would also still be able to do that as a sole trader, but even if they're an employee and you're not employed by your business, you could still do it as a sole trader. Do a shameless plug here, as I've got a bit of a cough, so I'm going to have a sweet from one of these ones. These are the Tiny Tots from Australian Sweet Cake. I'll let you know how they go.
I think she said to make sure you share. But
okay, sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll pass them on. Very good. It's helping my cough.
Very
Australian
good.
Sweet Cake. Thank you.
There you go, team. This one from Lee Lane. She wants you to get out your crystal ball. When do you see gyms and dance schools opening back up?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't loathe the comments. I don't really want to go down the pathway of trying to second guess epidemiology. I just encourage you to follow the mantra that we're following, which is prepare for the worst. So there's a very realistic possibility at worst that the shutdown of businesses like gyms and dance schools continues for quite a while. But should it, will it? I don't know, but I'd certainly plan as though it will do.
Okay. This one from Ken. Can a sole trader whose income has decreased apply for JobKeeper while employed at a side part-time job, that is 4 shifts a fortnight?
Can a sole trader, they're also working part-time somewhere else, is
Yes.
that there? So, and they want to know whether they can claim for themselves. So you can only claim in one location. So if they've nominated and agreed to nomination as the part-time employee, they wouldn't be able to do it themselves as well.
This general one from Julie. Can you please confirm that I'm paying JobKeeper correctly? I'm currently paying the employee for hours actually worked. If we're approved, hopefully this week, for JobKeeper, I just then top up her pay. Is that correct?
If the employee's earning less than $1,500, then yeah, you would top up between what they've earned and how much. But I wouldn't. You need to have done that, or by the 8th of May is the date, in order to make sure you get the JobKeeper back. So you can't get the JobKeeper and then top up. You need to do the top up beforehand.
This one from Jenny. Our business was sold partway through a fortnight. The new business has registered for JobKeeper also. Do we pay the full fortnight even though they were only with our business for 4 days of that fortnight? Or will the new owners pay that fortnight also? We just want to avoid any double up.
I'd be honest, Jenny, I'd need to check the rules on that. But I mean, the basic premise will be only one of you should do it. You can't. One of you should pay the 1,500 and claim it, and not the other one. But which one of you is? I'm not sure the rules are express on that, to be honest, in your particular circumstances. If they're not, and you don't hear from me, it's because you should just be choosing between the two of you which one of you is going to do it. But you shouldn't both do it.
Okay. Claire asks, is an employee on a full-time fixed-term award employment contract eligible for JobKeeper? Their employment commenced September 2019.
So the fixed term.
Yes.
The award covered.
Yes.
So I don't know which award. You'd need to have a look at that to see whether they get treated within the award as a permanent staff member. But they started when was the suggestion?
They started September last year.
So they were employed as of the 1st of March. And assuming they're on something that looks like a permanent basis through the award, then they should be eligible as far as I can think. The only reason they wouldn't be is if there's a very different definition of them within the award.
Okay.
That sounds suitably vague, but I'll have a look at that question offline as well.
Okay. This one from Trang. We reported and enrolled for eligible employees by single touch payroll. Do I need to go to the business portal and do step 2 called identify and maintain employees eligible for JobKeeper wage subsidies? What is my next step?
So Trang's done step 1.
Yep.
And is wondering whether to go through step 2 and identify the employees.
Yes.
That should be the case now, particularly coming up to the 8th of May. You've got to specifically identify them in order to claim for them. But I'll have a talk to our portal experts here as well, just to understand exactly what's going on there.
Okay. This is from Holly. Where do we actually send our business reduced income eligibility info? Or we just prepare it for when we are asked? Also, do we keep the employee nomination notice for records or have to send it somewhere? Also, do we just assume we will get the money if we followed the process correctly? Holly says, I am nervous and cynical.
Yeah, I'm Holly, nervous and cynical. That's, so the answer to the first 2 questions are, I believe you do the reporting through the business portal. Yes, I'd keep hold of the nomination forms for record keeping. And yes, you just have to assume that you're going to get paid the money, and it says in the rules that you should get it by the 14th, which is not looking that far off now. And the ATO, as I understand it, have been communicating they're intending to pay week beginning the 8th. So you should, week beginning, what will it be, the 10th, I think it is. So hopefully you'll be starting to see some money come through this time next week.
Mm-hmm. Judy asks, if you nominate based on a projected downturn in June, do you have to report turnover for April and May as well, or just June?
So no, I mean, basically what you're doing through the portal is just nominating June. You don't, you would then on an ongoing basis, you would start providing your reporting from June going forwards, as I understand it. You haven't said that you're suffering a downturn in April or May. But I don't think that you'd get the JobKeeper fortnights in April and May, though, if that's what you've done.
Amy asks, if my team go back to work full-time hours and we're using JobKeeper, do they receive superannuation on their full-time wage?
They do, yes. So if they're working full-time hours and getting paid wages, then you pay them super as normal.
Okay. This one from Daniel. Can an employer use the JobKeeper payment to subsidise long service leave for an employee?
If the employee agrees for it, yeah, there doesn't seem to be anything in the rules which stop you from doing that, but you can force your employee to do that on long service leave.
This one from Jenny. I have a casual employee who's eligible for JobKeeper and earned about $4,500 before tax in April. My understanding is I do not need to pay any top-up, but she's arguing that during the second JobKeeper fortnight, because her actual work hours and subsequent pay based on those hours for that fortnight is less than $1,500, she believes she's eligible for a top-up for that fortnight! Exclamation mark. Both she and I called ATO and Fair Work and they're getting different information. Both are convinced that we're right. Please help.
Both are convinced the employer is right. But there's this rule in the in the rules, which basically says you can reasonably allocate the $1,500 between the fortnights. So if you've paid for 500 across 3 fortnights, then you should be able to reasonably allocate in accordance with what is being said by the ATO and FWO, no doubt. So there is one caveat to that, though. It depends on your pay cycle. So I'd have a look at your pay cycle to see whether that rule seems to be done on the basis that if you're doing a monthly pay, for example, as it sounds like you might be, then you can reasonably allocate.
Mm-hmm. This one from Peter. We have a client whose employee is on an aged pension and was working part-time. Are they entitled for JobKeeper for this employee?
If it's a part-time employee that was employed on the 1st of March, and yes, the employee, I've heard a few cases of this, where the employee doesn't want to be entitled. They're worried about their pension being removed because they suddenly start earning too much. So it would depend a bit on that as to whether the employee said yes to it or not, but in principle you can nominate them.
Chris asks this one, does JobKeeper count for payroll tax? If you're close to the threshold, it could tip you into payroll tax.
Good question. So my belief is it shouldn't, because it's not wages. That said, we've seen this situation with WorkCover where WorkCover seems to be treating JobKeeper, even though where it's topped up and not wages, as relevant income for the purposes of, relevant to your payroll for the purposes of calculating premium. I assume the ATO is not going to do the same on payroll tax, but we have to wait and see to understand.
Alison asks, do we need to get new nomination forms for dependent 16 and 17-year-olds who are now not eligible?
I would propose that you do go and show them or provide them with the updated nomination form and ask them to sign it, just so that you're not then caught into paying them or having them eligible going forward.
From Charlotte, can a not-for-profit organisation pay less of the JobKeeper toward their staff and use the remainder toward their fundraising cash pool?
Sorry, no, Charlotte, is the short answer. No, you've got to pay the $1,500 on, or you will already have paid it. I saw actually a good comment here from someone, I've lost their name now as it's gone through the stream, but they said it's pretty hard to rort a system where you're the first one that has to pay it. So I'm of that view as well. That generally employers are the ones that you've got to have paid this money to get it back. So in Charlotte's case, you will already have paid the $1,500, so you can you divvy it up if you like to your income pool as well.
This visa question from Fiona. Is a full-time permanent employee employed as of the 1st of March and is on a bridging visa eligible for JobKeeper?
It depends on what they're bridging to. Well, no, it doesn't actually. Sorry, I'm going down the wrong pathway there. Unless they are on the 1st of March, unless they were Social Security eligible in Australia is the rule basically, then no, they're not eligible.
And Ed, you've touched on this many times over the last few weeks, but worth revisiting, I think. From Scott, if a staff member was on Job Seeker previously because we didn't know about our downturn, can we change it to JobKeeper now that we are eligible?
You can. So if you're applying and they are eligible, then you would nominate them. They would choose whether to say yes to that nomination or not. And if they've been getting Job Seeker, they would have to notify Centrelink as well. So that's not really your problem though. Your problem is just whether they're going to sign that form or not. And if they do, then you'd pay them the $1,500 and you'd get it recovered from the ATO.
Random comment from Helen Knox Audiology. Thank you for providing a systemised, informative, practical flow of interpretation of these new guidelines. Your view to support every small business so we work together and as one is so gratefully received and has kept our sanity to keep calm, pivot and take sensible, timely action.
Great, thank you, Helen. That's not that random. I've seen one up here that said we're a virus that's taking over the world. I said that seems really random. Helen seemed on point to me. And also Annette's got completely confused and she's addressing the question to you as well, Stu. And she obviously hasn't heard the memo that this is a one-singer band, and please just only address me, not Stu.
Absolutely, I'm playing bass, and that's where I'm
exactly,
saying.
Yeah.
From From Jenny, regarding staff that come back from being stood down, do we accrue annual leave on hours worked or full-time hours they worked prior to being stood down?
So accruing leave is a tricky one to do. And when you say the word stood down, I think you just need to be careful on this. If they were truly stood down, then you would accrue up to the point of them returning, and then in the normal way. When you're stood down, your leave accruals carry on basically, and they will do under a JobKeeper enabled stand down. If you agreed leave without pay, then you don't accrue leave in that way. So it really depends technically on what you actually did with your staff during that period.
Okay. From Melissa, can a full-time staff member be sent on leave while receiving JobKeeper, or can they use holiday pay to make up their 38 hours a week? Some staff already have 5+ weeks of leave available to them.
So you're entitled to ask them to use their holiday, and they can't reasonably say no to that. So you request them to go, essentially stand them down, but pay them their leave during that period. Then you'd use JobKeeper to pay for that leave. So you're entitled to do that up to the 2-week bank of leave that they've got to keep.
From Amy, I have back paid my 16-year-old casual the first 2 fortnights of JobKeeper as she was eligible. Am I okay to now pay her a 3rd fortnight, or should I stop paying now that she is no longer eligible going forward?
So the rules do it up to the 3rd fortnight, including the 3rd fortnight. So yes, you can pay the 3rd fortnight and still recover it, but then she won't be eligible beyond that if she's at that age doesn't satisfy the dependent rules or the full-time education rules.
And this one on pay cycles from Marie. When is JobKeeper paid? Is it on payroll cycle? And how long after we pay wages?
So you pay it in accordance with your normal payroll cycle, whether that's weekly, monthly, fortnightly, regardless of the fortnight that you do it. And you would pay it. It says that you're meant to do it within the fortnight that you're claiming. There seems to be a bit of a challenge with this in that sometimes people are paying, for example, on the 1st or 3rd of May, which is halfway through a JobKeeper fortnight, and they might only pay in arrears, which means they're paying partly to a fortnight that's already concluded. My general view has been that you're not meant to stuff around with your payroll system in order to obtain JobKeeper. So just carry on in your normal cycle, making sure you properly apportion the 1,500 top up to fortnightly periods.
Comment from Greg and Bernie in Cairns. Ed, from an accountant's view, I don't know why all businesses with employees don't use your services. Easy to understand, very practical. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was Greg and...
Greg and Bernie in Cairns.
Thanks, Greg and Bernie. Thank you. I appreciate that.
This from Jenny. Can you confirm that as long as an employee was full-time as of the 1st of March and they are 17 years old, that they are eligible for JobKeeper? I keep hearing references to 16 and 17-year-olds who are dependents not being eligible. Can you clarify just one more time, please?
Sure, yeah. If they were 17, 1st of March, yes, they're eligible as long as they are not either dependent or in full-time education under the meaning of the Social Security Act. And if you want a bit of a guide as to what that means, have a look online at the nomination form. It gives you a bit of a guide as to what being dependent means.
Robert says, a parent has refused to let her daughter go to work as a part-time apprentice hairdresser. Is she entitled to JobKeeper?
So if she's entitled to JobKeeper, it's not a question of what the parent is saying or not saying. So it sounds as though she probably is if she was an apprentice as at the 1st of March 2020. And you should therefore nominate her, and she should either sign or not sign the form. If she signs the form and then says, oh, by the way, my parent's not letting me come into work, that's when you would get into this cycle of saying, look, actually, I've got a contractual relationship with you. You're meant to be coming into work. They say, no, my parent says no. And you'd say, well, we're doing all that is required of us by the government, assuming you are to maintain social distancing and a safe workplace. We can do one or two things. Either you might choose to do this, no obligation. You might choose to allow that apprentice to take unpaid leave. If you're not inclined to do that because you need them in, then you'd be escalating it and starting to say, look, ultimately this is going to result in disciplinary processes if you don't return to work, and trying to get them back in that way.
Thanks. Just wrapping up with this final comment from Catriona. I really appreciate these sessions. They are helpful as a small business. JobKeeper is still a bit of a mystery, but your information is getting me through.
Thank you, Catriona. You know what worries me a bit, I suppose, is that yes, I think the JobKeeper questions will start to diminish a bit this week. We'll start to move on to different topics, of which I've got a nice focus area and slash pivot story for you tomorrow of our own as we move forward into getting our workplaces ready for return. But it does worry me a bit that there might be employers that have kind of, I saw in one comment a few days ago that someone said, oh, I'm giving up essentially. This is all too much, it's all too confusing. And I just thought that, you know, the one thing that separates us at the moment between sort of economic disaster and actually getting back to something that looks a bit like normal is that grit and determination of small business owners. That cafe owner that I referenced earlier, getting up at 4 a.m. every day to go and take the deliveries to get his or her cafe open by 5 or 6 a.m. Yeah, that kind of thankless grit and determination that no one sees, that's the stuff that will get us going. So if anyone is still utterly perplexed about JobKeeper, maybe you've got to the stage where you're too embarrassed to ask questions because the ones on here are starting to get so deep and technical, and you think, crikey, I'm really behind the 8 ball. I don't understand the first thing. Then reach out to us. Have a look at, first of all, maybe have a look at our resources on employsure.com.au/JobKeeper. Reach out to EmploySure otherwise, and let's see if we can help you through this. The last thing I want is people giving up because it all just seems too difficult. Anyway, as I say, pivot story tomorrow, guys. In the meantime, I'm going to go and stuff my face with all of these lollies and be on a sugar high for the rest of the day. So thank you very much. Any further sweets and treats, welcome.